Julianne.
I apologize in advance. Can you guys hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Apologize in advance. I don't love speaking in front of a whole crowd, so I'm going to do my best. Also wanted to say thank you to everybody who has helped me this week. Before I start, I had surgery 7 weeks ago now on my foot. And last week, I thought I was going to be getting off the scooter, and when I found out I wasn't, it was a really rough week for me, and I was doubting coming to KTI. I didn't share that with anyone, but I had moments where I was like, do I really think I could do this for a whole week? And now that I'm here, thank you. Now that I'm here, and I've said this to a couple people, it's actually been kind of easier for me here. Because everybody's just been helping me, and it's really been nice. So I just wanted you to know that that's been appreciated, and thank you. So my name's Julianne Lowenstein, and I'm going to share with you my story today. I titled it Behind the Mask, and we're going to hope that this will work. Perhaps. There we go. All right, now I apologize, but I'm going to read a lot of what I have as I'm going through, and I'm going to try to talk into the microphone like Fernando told me to. So, in 2022, my principal came up to me, and I'm sure many of you have a similar story, congratulating me on being selected as a KTI star. When my summit application was accepted, and I showed up on campus, despite everyone telling me I belonged, I figured it was one of those years that they just let everyone in. The day before lead learner applications were due the following year, I was talking to Chrissy and Eric and said, I'm thinking of applying, but I don't really have that much to share. I don't know what I could share that would be valuable. They both encouraged me, I applied, and I made it on staff. And I figured it must have been one of those years where they just let everyone on staff. Last year at KTI, someone asked me if I was going to share my story. I think my exact response was, I don't really have a story to share. If you haven't caught on yet, I have a bit of imposter syndrome with a sprinkle of self-doubt. But as I was sitting in the back there, listening to others share, I started thinking about my own story, and I realized I did have a short story to share. It might just look a little bit different than those that I was hearing that day. So I actually went back to my dorm room, not my home, thankfully. And I lay in my bed, and I was up until 1 in the morning just typing, because all my thoughts started coming together, and I started thinking about what is my story? How did I get to this place? Sorry, too many things to pull. There we go. I've always struggled with fitting in and finding myself, but if you were to ask my teachers growing up, you'd likely hear things like, she was a pleasure to have in class. Hard worker, always happy, good student. If you ask my parents, they'd say I was an easy child. I never caused issues, and I did what I perceived would make others happy. On the outside, I looked like a normal, well-adjusted kid. February 17th, 2023, I pulled out the receipts. Okay, thank you. I was sitting in the auditorium at my school's high school as a lady spoke to us during an in-service about ACE, or Adverse Childhood Experiences. The list here that you can maybe sort of see, maybe sort of not, popped up, and I just kept thinking, check, 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 check. And I snapped this picture because I was like, whoa, is this lady describing my childhood right now? But I didn't have a traumatic childhood, did I? Lots of kids had divorced parents, and they did just fine. The first memory I have of my parents talking about getting divorced was when I was in 5th grade. Money was always an issue, and they would fight constantly. But my parents wouldn't get divorced. How would that work? Who would keep the PlayStation? Important questions. When I was in 8th grade, my parents decided officially they were going to separate, but neither one of them was moving out. My dad stayed in the bedroom, and my mom moved downstairs. You can only imagine how well this went. For the next 3 years, we lived this way. My dad was verbally abusive and would flip like a switch. I was always walking on eggshells, scared to do or say something to set him off. Meanwhile, my mom was just trying to survive. My older sister began acting out verbally against my parents and at times against me. Nothing I did was ever good enough. It was always ugly, or she could have done it better. The more I heard it, the more I internalized it. My way of dealing with it, I poured everything into my schoolwork and made myself busy with extracurricular activities. I ignored what was happening and pretended like everything at home was normal. I was continuously commended for my successes throughout school, but never felt accomplished. I had to do better because, like my dad would say, you only got a B. While on the outside, I looked like I was excelling. I was living in a constant state of fight, flight, or freeze. In middle school, I started having panic attacks regularly. I did not understand what was happening and never shared the extent of how bad they were with anyone. Instead, I took it upon myself to learn to control them, the little control I had left of my own life at this point. The first major panic attack I had was while I was giving a soapbox speech in my history class. I began shaking and crying and ended up running out of the classroom crying. After that, I was scared to go back to class. What if it happened again? That year, my history teacher signed my yearbook to the effect, to the quietest but most talented girl. Now, if you know me, you probably wouldn't describe me as quiet. But it wasn't any different then. But I just didn't feel safe in that classroom, and I was so quiet because my mind was always so loud, focused on not having another panic attack. I remember wishing that teacher would talk to my other teachers and realize that I was not the quiet girl that she thought I was. In 12th grade, I had a different history teacher, which oddly enough is my least favorite subject, nothing to do with either of these teachers, I'm just not a history person. She was actually kind of ahead of the times, and she gave us a Google form survey, and it was just like a digital getting to know you, and at that point, I felt safe enough to tell her that I was nervous. As a senior, I was going to have to present at the end of the year a 10-minute presentation for my senior project, and I didn't know how I was going to do it. She wrote back to me on the form, didn't talk to me in person, which I really appreciated, because I wouldn't have talked to her in person, I don't think. And she just offered me support and validation, and I realized it really was just that easy. At this point, school had become the most consistent place in my life, and it became a safe space for me. Then came college. I began to really struggle with anxiety freshman year and got not just one, but 2 Bs my first semester. I was scared to leave my dorm room because it was the only place I felt safe. I felt like a failure, but I also began to realize that something needed to change. Sophomore year, my dad exploded over a trivial issue and cut me out of his life after writing me a letter about how he used to be proud of me and no longer was. I was devastated, but it also finally gave me the push to seek out the help that I needed. I finally had something concrete to talk about and began talking to a counselor on campus who helped me to navigate the stress and better understand my anxiety. I got on medication and I stopped having daily panic attacks. I went from freshman year being anxious to leave my dorm room to fall of my junior year studying abroad in France with the help of one of my French professors. I would like to say that I continued therapy and began to understand my childhood, but it wasn't until years later, probably about 2 years now, that I found myself back in therapy, and thank goodness for that. I finally identified that what I went through was trauma, and I've now since been working through it. Furthermore, I got diagnosed with ADHD, which my parents never decided to seek a diagnosis officially just because I got good grades, so why did I need the ADHD diagnosis? I found this, I don't have the site sorted right, source cited right now, sorry. But I can get you that if you're interested. There is a cool few graphics from this lady that I just appreciated as I was going through. But once I got this validation of having ADHD, so much of my life began to make sense. Another part, after not talking to my sister for probably close to 7 to 8 years, last January I was able to reconnect with her, I found out I had a niece, and it's been the coolest part of my life. We began to understand together. We were able to have a conversation and how we dealt with the trauma in different ways. And it was cool for me to see her perspective. And I just celebrated my niece's 2nd birthday with her before KTI. And it's just the best. So I always wanted to be a teacher, but as I kind of explained, middle school was one of the hardest times in my life. And I'm sure many of you relate to that. I really didn't enjoy those years, and I really remember mostly the struggles. Yet somehow, I find myself back in the world of middle school as a teacher. Some of you might be grimacing right now because middle schoolers, am I right? But I've learned that I'm exactly where I am meant to be. To be that safe space that I wish I had had, and to advocate for my students. As in cases of trauma, there's a lot of my childhood that I don't always remember, as I was constantly in that state of fight or flight. However, I do remember the teachers who made me feel safe in their rooms, those who saw me behind the mask, and those who did not. And I want to thank you all now for being my safe space. Thank you.
Thanks. I was on my way up to thank Julianne, but the line's forming from the staff who's encouraging her to go through with this, so I'll do this from here. Eric's going to provide you with some transition instructions, get you a little bit of a break, and as you wander into Ed Camp, you know, to get yourself taken care of here a little bit. We've got several 15-minute breaks scheduled in the next couple hours, so.
All right, so if you would, open up your computers to our schedule room, if you would.